I am a person who is no stranger to fan theories, and although some of them might seem like they could have some validity, even though we all know they don't, they are really fun and interesting to hear. But the truth is, there's no way that most of them could be accurate. In March of last year, I more or less remade my top 10 list of fake cartoon theories, more or less to prove the point that you can find parallels in anything and basically make a cartoon theory out of it, even though the original cartoon theories were nothing more than slander. And yeah, since my brain has, well, come up with some, ideas, let's put it that way, I'm going to be doing, I did another list, and in this video, you will be seeing my top 10 list of fake fan theories. And yeah, all of these are going to be original. None of them are going to be things that I used on the fake cartoon theories list. Either one. So, with that said and done, and the fact that I'm doing this just to prove what bullshit fan theories are, let's start with number 1 on this list. The SCP Foundation will eventually overthrow all governments and replace them with a dictatorship ran by the O5 Council. And that's why the SCP Foundation exists. Why else would they keep a killer AI that wants to end humanity, a cursed Greek theater mask that drives the user crazy and corrupts it, a handbell that summons a genie butler who will carry out any task given to him, no matter how immoral or criminal, an evil pig god idol thing that has mind control powers, what essentially amounts to Pennywise from It, an entity that turns into any toy it comes in contact with, a cursed haunted kids show, a cursed slasher movie about a killer doll, the other slasher movie that's apparently cursed, where a babysitter gets hunted and killed, with the twist ending that the killer is secretly whoever's watching the tape. A box of old cartoons on VHS tapes that you could easily make the argument that the lost episode stories on the internet were on tapes that, came from this box. Who amounts to Godzilla? An evil clown that only little kids can see, who is constantly turning them into deranged killers, and that's not to mention all of the other SCPs they have locked up there who could easily destroy the world. Hell, there's even a hypothetical timeline where the SCP Foundation itself lost its humanity, became completely homicidal, and were sicking these things on humanity. I'm just gonna say it. The SCP Foundation is a front for a future dictatorship. Why else would they be gathering all these things and not destroying and or killing the ones they could, unless they eventually planned to sick them on us like attack dogs, unless every government on Earth were to surrender their power to the Foundation, and the common man was to essentially acknowledge the SCP Foundation as his new god. As in, it's only a matter of time until the Foundation declares that they run the world now. There are no governments. They run things. They control every aspect of your life and will have you killed in a really messed up way if you even show the slightest amount of resistance. Rey Palpatine is insane, and the entire Star Wars sequel trilogy is one big hallucination going on inside her mind. I'm just gonna call her Rey for simplicity's sake, but as a young girl, Rey came from a family of Star Wars fans. And when I say it, I mean they were a huge family. And, they were really into Star Wars. It is what their life revolved around. Now, I don't know how much Rey enjoyed the movies herself, but one night they went to see an actual premiere of one of the prequels, and when tragedy struck, her family died in a car accident, and she was the only survivor. The trauma this inflicted on her, because she was very little when this happened, actually drove her insane. She spent years in a mental institution. And in her madness, Star Wars was apparently the only thing she knew and was the only thing in her life. It's very unlikely that she had other friends, because at that point in time, Star Wars wasn't really for girls. So she created a reality where she could be unstoppable and do anything, because she feels she should have been able to stop that car crash. Which is why in the prequels, Rey is a complete Mary Sue who can do anything. Jason Voorhees has fourth wall awareness. Contrary to common misconception, Jason is not a zombie, nor is he immortal. The zombie Jason was actually Roy Burns, a lunatic who thought he was Jason Voorhees and was brought back from the dead by Tommy Elliott in Part 6 and by that psychic girl in Part 7. And when, this guy is the Slasher King. He seems completely indestructible. It makes no sense how this guy can just escape death time and time again. The answer is simple. He is the Slasher King. When it comes time for Halloween, his movies bring in a lot of money. So Paramount, New Line Cinema, and by that extent Warner Brothers, actually do have an incentive to keep him alive. So they actually have the crew wait until the cameras are off right as Jason is on the verge of death, and they show up, they untie him, and they more or less put basically a dummy or a padded up stunt double in his place. The final girl attacks a protected stunt double or a dummy. She thinks she's killed Jason Voorhees. The end. A common misconception about Friday the 13th is whether or not Jason is alive. He is. He is not a zombie. This guy is not Jason Voorhees. He is Roy Burns, a lunatic who impersonated Jason in Part 5 and was killed off at the end of the movie. Then he was brought back as a zombie by Tommy Elliott in Part 6, choked to death by him and drowned in Crystal Lake, until that psychic girl brought Roy Burns back from the dead as a zombie in Part 7. And when Part 8 rolled around and Roy Burns was gone for good, Jason returned because he knew his franchise needed him back, and that Roy Burns was no longer needed. As for Freddy vs. Jason, Jason knew he was going to win the fight. Not because of the fact that, well, Freddy was scaring people and Jason was off, doing the research, collecting the documents, reading Nancy's diary, and figuring out how to kill Freddy. The actual reason he knew he was going to win is because of his fourth wall awareness, or more or less the fact that the film Jason X came out 2 years prior. That movie was not a dream. Since he was the killer in that movie, he actually knew that Freddy stood no chance, because the events of Jason X were going to happen. Therefore, the plot of that movie could not have him killed. The Nightmare on Elm Street insanity theory. Nancy Prescott was your typical average teenage girl. But one night she threw a party and things got real wild to the point where the garage was completely burnt down. Her father was inside the garage and he was burnt to death as he couldn't escape. This caused Nancy so much grief and trauma that she went insane. Through guilt, she feels she needed to be punished. So she recreated her father as Freddy Krueger, someone who would seek vengeance for being burnt alive. Nancy survived facing Freddy, but like her father, all her friends died in that fire, which is why most of the time Freddy kills off all of the teenagers in Nancy's fantasies. Driven by guilt and trauma and grief, Nancy knew that it would only be a matter of time until she would face an end at Freddy's hands. So, subconsciously, she recreated herself as the final girl in each installment of the franchise. The fact that is obviously shown that the last official final girl was actually Freddy's daughter. As for Freddy himself, nearing Nancy's return to sanity, the reason why Freddy is killed by Jason Voorhees was because that when her father was alive, Nancy herself was a huge fan of the Friday the 13th films, which is actually an in-universe movie series. She needed someone worse than Freddy, the psychological manifestation of her father, mixed with her guilt, trauma, and grief over what happened at the party that night, to be destroyed by someone even more evil. Princess Leia was supposed to be seen as an idiot. Okay, it is more than obvious that when it comes to Star Wars, Princess Leia is 100% useless. In the first movie, she gets captured by Darth Vader and needs to be rescued by Luke and Han. In addition to that, and if she wasn't stupid enough to get captured, the Empire would have never found out where the rebel base, the original rebel base, was. As for Empire Strikes Back, she doesn't really do anything of relevance, but yeah, since it was her fault that the Empire found out where the first rebel base was, and if she wasn't stupid enough to get captured, the Empire wouldn't have found out where the second base on planet Hoth was. Okay, and now it's time for me to get the elephant out of the room. Return of the Jedi. She gets captured by Jabba the Hutt and is made his personal slave girl, complete with metal bikini. It is the only thing she does throughout the entire movie. Yes, she does strangle Jabba, but that could have been done by any other character in the movie. Hell, you had Lando Calrissian undercover as one of Jabba's guards, and he actually had a weapon. Princess Leia, who is half naked, does not have a weapon. If anything, the chains were to keep her in place. And in all fairness, yeah, this comes off as dumb luck. If Luke Skywalker hadn't shown up to save her, she'd be stuck as Jabba's personal belly dancer for the rest of her life. I am not going to make any friends with what I'm about to say, but as of the 2010s, this attire has come under attack by Disney. Yeah, Disney does not like the idea of a princess being made into a slave girl. But in all fairness, that is 100% on George Lucas. And the thing is, he knew what he was doing. The truth is, Princess Leia is essentially just a damsel in distress in the first movie, as well as an idiot, and an idiot in the second movie, so this really shouldn't surprise you. He can make all of the feminist statements he wants because Disney is forcing him to, but that really doesn't change the fact that in Return of the Jedi, Leia was stupid enough to be captured by Jabba the Hutt and made into his personal slave girl so that Luke Skywalker could rescue her. And if George Lucas didn't intend for this to be part of the trilogy, because this is the kind of thing that Disney would force him to use Death of the Author on, then he would have never put it in the original trilogy to begin with. And despite what Disney wants to accept, this is just as much a part of Star Wars as the space battles, the lightsabers, and the I am your father moment from The Empire Strikes Back. It has been subject to countless references, homages, and parodies. As for the sequel trilogy, She did nothing of use or importance that could have been done by anyone else. Tons of people on the internet have made it clear that they hate Jar Jar Binks, the character George Lucas added as comic relief. Well, the thing is, if you have a problem with this idiot, you probably might want to start developing a problem with this idiot, 'cause in a weird, below-the-threshold way, Princess Leia was the original comic relief of Star Wars. She herself was the original Jar Jar Binks. The Shrek insanity theory. Okay, here's how this works. Fiona is not a princess or an ogre. She was actually just a little girl who was not only a fan of the Disney princess lineup, she was obsessed with that whole goddamn franchise. But she was also mentally unstable due to various psychological conditions that she was born with. When King Harold and Queen Lillian locked her up in the Dragon's Keep, that was actually how her mind interpreted being committed to an insane asylum. Shrek is actually not her rescuer. He's actually her therapist. And the reason he rescues her in her delusions is because he actually managed to bring her back to reality. It took him a very long time, but it happened. Donkey and Puss in Boots are actually just Shrek's two interns. Donkey was hired to work full-time at the insane asylum first, which is why he's Shrek's sidekick. And Puss in Boots got a job as a therapist at another psychiatric ward for a while, which is how, well, Fiona's interpretation of that were the two Puss in Boots spin-off movies. And although we don't know if Fiona lives happily ever after, since the story of Shrek is actually just the ravings of a deranged madwoman who's obsessed with Disney, it could be possible, if only because not marrying Fiona could actually cause her to relapse back into insanity or fall into a completely catatonic state. SCP-4304 is the secret key to proving the existence of the anime multiverse. What is the anime multiverse, you may ask? Well, I'm going to let ChatGPT explain that one for me.
The anime multiverse theory states that every reality eventually to become was exactly like an anime, with each reality outbeinged by variants of real people who actually exist by the one thing that is always certain throughout the multiverse, is that eventually each world will be molded into the image of a different anime.
Evidence for this theory falls under the assumption that the rubber's interpretation is indeed the correct one. But since I couldn't find another, yeah. This is clearly the canonical version of SCP-4304, and I will be leaving a link to his channel and the video in the description. It was stated that the Blue Knight does not come from our reality. Just look at this mech. It looks like something straight out of Neon Genesis Evangelion. And when you take a good look at how both Blue Knight, the robot, and the woman who pilots it fights, you can see a lot of evidence that points to this thing and this woman being highly connected to the anime multiverse. It is clear that the Blue Knight is from the Neon Genesis Evangelion universe, but apparently from this display here, it could easily be theorized that the Blue Knight either was born in the Slayer's universe, or that the Neon Genesis Evangelion universe is the Slayer's universe within its far future, having become a hybrid of two different anime realities, possibly as the result of some kind of New 52 style cosmic reboot or remake. And given Agent Jo's backstory of how she claims to have idolized the Blue Knight as a child, but not anymore, after the incident that destroyed her home was due to a fight that the Blue Knight was in and or caused, implies that Agent Jo herself hails from the Neon Genesis Evangelion world from within the anime multiverse. Her mech, on the other hand, clearly seems to stem from the Overman King Gainer dimension, implying that she was hunting the Blue Knight at one point and had to make a pit stop there. Given the strength of the Blue Knight's mech, it's obvious that Agent Jo knew that she couldn't take her on without one of her own, to level the playing field. For reasons unknown, she could not get a giant robot in her own universe, so we can easily assume she made a pit stop in the Overman King Gainer dimension of the anime multiverse, and either acquired legally or hijacked one of their robots. It isn't exactly out of the picture to bring up the possibility that this woman does not come from our world. I mean, the Blue Knight here certainly doesn't. And then there's the fact that piloting the mecha in general puts a lot of strain on the Blue Knight's mind and body, which in itself is the kind of thing you'd expect to see in an anime, and a reality that's based off of an anime. And then there's Agent Joe's backstory. As a little girl, she idolized the Blue Knight until the tragic event that destroyed her hometown. Now, as an adult, she wants to be the one to bring the Blue Knight to justice. I could definitely see an anime character having that same exact backstory. And since we know the Blue Knight did not come from our reality, we also know the same applies to Agent Joe. And this brings us to the Blue Knight's contact, the Nobody. This guy is a criminal that no one knows anything about. Even if the Foundation knows something about him, it's next to nothing. This guy is like an evil version of L, or very similar to characters like Lupin the Third, or Leoch from Code Geass. With all that said and done, the only question that's left to ask is, what anime will our reality be molded into in the future? No one can truly be certain what fate has in store for our universe, nor could we possibly know the image of the anime that our reality will be molded into. But if I were to be honest with you, my guess is a 5-way tie between Dragon Ball, Yu Yu Hakusho, Naruto, Welcome to Demon School Iruma-kun, and Tokyo Majin. Ocean's 11 is actually a work of satire. It's essentially something that suffers from what I like to call Powerpuff Girl syndrome, where the franchise in general is supposed to be a parody, but when you look at how it was written, the people who did write it accidentally played it way too straight, and the joke went over people's heads. I mean, this came out in the 60s, and Ocean's 11 is about a bunch of criminals robbing a casino and constantly backstabbing each other. I guarantee you that unless it was meant to be seen as a parody, that something made in the 60s, a time when the Hays Code was in effect, it would have never gotten past the censors. The film tries to have a Robin Hood style premise to justify what these guys are doing, and when the Hays Code was established, Robin Hood was a very popular novel, but there weren't very many movies made based off it when, Hollywood first sprung up, even though it's the kind of thing that it was so big back then, they'd be jumping at the prospect like crazy to make a film based off of Robin Hood, since it's in the public domain. The creator of Ocean's 11 knew that this would be a good movie. He just didn't see it as sequel good. The studio, on the other hand, they didn't get that part. They took the concept completely seriously, even though the joke was that you're rooting for the guys who would be the villains in any other movie. For crying out loud, they cast Frank Sinatra and his Rat Pack buddies as the main characters. That should be a complete indicator that this was meant to be a parody of crime films, in the same exact way that the Powerpuff Girls is a parody of superheroes, and therefore an un-American show. Naruto and Avatar are set in the same reality, but their stories take place during a post-apocalyptic future. Based on the great stone faces of the Hokage, Naruto is set on the land that once was the United States of America, while given the architecture in the world of Avatar, Aang and his friends clearly live in what remains of Asia after the end of the world. The second Naruto movie did show us that the world is larger than the 5 great nations, and we eventually did see a lot more of that in Naruto Shippuden. And given that it was around Season 3 in Avatar that someone in the Earth Kingdom would try to rediscover flight, thinking that he invented it himself, means that there could be more than the 4 great nations out there, but the various benders and non-benders have not discovered them yet. And since the civilization where this land once stood was attacked by a terrorist group whose name started with the letter A, it could easily be assumed that the name Akatsuki could easily be a mispronunciation of the name Al-Qaeda. Since they are a terrorist organization and they would want to strike fear into the hearts as many people as they could, why not go as so far as to take the name of the terrorists who attacked the nation that once stood on this land so badly that a war broke out because of it. And they would follow in their footsteps, essentially becoming the modern-day Al-Qaeda. ChatGPT also agrees.
Villages are scattered across what is now the United States. Evidence fans cite, tongue-in-cheek, includes the layout of some villages and the geography resembling certain U.S. regions. Modern references like traffic lights and certain technologies hinting at an advanced society that could have collapsed. Names like Land of Fire or Land of Water could be playful nods to U.S. states/regions.
You never know, maybe one day we'll actually get an epic crossover where these two iconic anime heroes will meet and team up. It's a long shot, but you never know. It might actually happen. Samurai Jack is a retelling of Batman. What I mean by this is the fact that Samurai Jack is actually a retelling of various Batman storylines, and that is actually going beyond the fact that these two characters both have a lot of things in common. Both spent their childhoods training to avenge their parents. Both have rich fathers who either have the exact same mantle that their sons wear, or one that is extremely similar to the mantle their sons wear. Both have loyal sidekicks who help them fight an array of colorful villains. Both have love interests who start out evil, but then eventually turn good after falling in love with the hero. Both Batman and Samurai Jack have fought evil counterparts or evil clones of themselves. Basically, they've both fought versions of themselves that were evil. Before Samurai Jack Season 5, we did get a non-canon comic book that ended with a hypothetical non-canon future where we see Jack and the Scotsman basically as the leaders of this massive resistance movement against a coup, which isn't really that far off from Batman Incorporated. essentially the superhero and his sidekick more or less having an army that they would lead into battle against an actual supervillain. As for Samurai Jack Season 5, you could easily see it as a cross between The Dark Knight Rises and Batman The Dark Knight Returns, both of which are about the main character, the superhero, not having been heard from for at least 5 years, and then springing back into action for one last time at the old rodeo. This is the season where Ashi made her debut, and you could easily compare her to the Nolanverse's version of Catwoman. The Scotsman's daughters were a massive help in the final fight against Aku, and you could kind of see them as analogs to Carrie Kelly from The Dark Knight Returns, who was technically the first female Robin. Gendy here, who created Samurai Jack, is a massive comic book fan to boot, which is even more evidence for this theory, and in a weird way kind of proves it. And that is my top 10 list of fake fan theories. Do I believe any of this myself? The answer is no. And don't worry, if you liked this, I have a sequel in the works. And I'm gonna give you a hint. It's gonna be like this, but like the predecessor to this video, all 10 theories in it are going to revolve around a certain medium. I'm just going to leave what medium exactly those 10 fake theories will revolve around as a mystery for now.